I wanted to welcome both Gary and George. We appreciate your willingness to be interviewed today. My name is Barry Loveland, and I'm here with John Powell, who's our videographer. We're here on behalf of the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania History Project. Today is January 30th, 2017, and we're here for an oral history interview with Gary Hufford and George Centini. This interview is taking place at their home in Lancaster. And Gary and George, do we have your permission to record the interview today?
Yes.
Okay, great. Like I mentioned before, we'll have a consent form for you to look over and sign at the end of the interview.
Sorry.
That's the perfect spot for that.
Yes, exactly. So I wanted to start at the very beginning, so maybe we'll alternate a little bit between the two of you so that we get your whole sort of original family story growing up and everything. So I wanted to find out, first of all, where you were born and what year you were born, and then talk a little bit about your family life growing up and so forth. So, George, you want to start?
Okay, I'm George Centini, and I was born and raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, March 11th, 1937. And my grandfather, who came to Lancaster from Italy, landed here, and he worked for the Groff Funeral Home. And at that time, the southern end of the city was mostly Italian people. And he bought a piece of ground down there, and they built their own home there. And he opened a restaurant there at that time, an Italian bar and restaurant. It was called Patsy's Cafe. And that's where I was born and raised. So that's where I got my upbringing in the bar business, at Patsy's Cafe, as a young boy. Lived there all my life, up into my teens when I started in junior high school with my mother and father. It was after the family more or less run the restaurant. After my stepdad built it, he stayed working for the Groff Funeral Home, and his wife and his sister, they did the kitchen work, and then his boys and their wives, my mother and dad, they more or less run the restaurant part and the bar part, you know. So that's where I was born and raised.
Okay. Did you have siblings, your sisters and brothers?
I had no.
Only child?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good.
Gary Hufford. I was born near Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, Chester County. Born and raised on a farm, and I have one brother. My parents are both gone. It was a nice upbringing, living on a farm. But I'd always liked the restaurant business. I came out working in a restaurant at a very young age. I liked the farm, but I didn't want to stay on the farm. So I always worked in the restaurant business all my whole career, you know. And I've been in Lancaster since '72. So,
George, talk a little bit about your like school life too.
School, I finished junior high school, started high school, and at that time my mother and father got divorced, and I lived then with my mother, and so at that time then I quit school and helped keep the household on.
Okay. So did you find school a good experience, or?
Oh yeah, all through school I enjoyed school, but at that time, to make things go better at home, I quit school and went to work, and she worked, and then over the years, then that's when I got involved in tending bar for the people that I bought the tally ho. Well, it was called Pip's Bar then, Pip's Place. I worked for them people for 5 years, and when Mrs. Eby's husband died, then she worked out a deal with me to buy the business from her. That was back in around guess that would be
I
around,
mean, the 60s.
around the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay. And did you, trying to think, question I had in my mind, it just kind of escaped me, but maybe we'll turn to Gary then and talk a little bit about your school life and what that was like.
I went to school in Unionville School, and I also went to a private school for a while, Phelps Boys School. I had no problem in school. I liked school, and I wasn't a great student, but I did go to school when I graduated from Unionville eventually at the end. But yeah, I mean, I had no problems with school or any bullying or anything like that. But it was a good experience.
I guess for either or both of you eventually, but when did you feel that you were different, or that you might be gay, or that you had some kind of feelings that you felt were not, like heterosexual kids around you?
I always was attracted to male men. I always really was. I mean, matter of fact, I really came out in gay life when I was 12.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with an older man. Yeah.
Wow. We'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. But yeah, so I had no issues with myself. I felt comfortable with it, and I have to honestly say I've never had any problems being gay. I know a lot of people probably have, but I've never had any bad experiences. I've never been bullied or picked on, or I've had a good, I've been lucky.
How did that experience come about with the older man?
He lived with my cousins. He was like a hired man, and just he liked, which was not really good right now, but he liked younger kids or guys, my age, 12, 13, 14. Yeah.
Wow. And you were okay with that?
Yeah, I really was. I'm sure other kids probably would have said, well, eventually he did get caught with a younger person, and got in trouble. So, but we all have our cross to bear.
Yes. Did you say what year you were born in?
I was born in 1952.
1952.
Yeah.
Okay. So the same question, I guess, for you, George, is when did you sort of feel different or feel like you were
Well,
gay?
I did have a lot affairs with women before I more or less come out into and got attracted into the gay life, I guess. I think my gay life started around the time when the village nightclub was running and they had the gay bar downstairs. And I just went out and had a couple affairs with different gay men, where it was more or less, I was straight at that time. And then they you know how they say, the old gay business, they always say, today's trade, tomorrow's competition. And that's when I came actually out into gay life.
And this was probably the early 60s, do you think? Or
In middle 60s, I would say.
mid-60s?
Yeah.
All right, good. And talk a little bit about that time in Lancaster. I mean, what was Lancaster like? You said the village was probably the only...
That was the main bar where gay men hung. And I was in my early 20s then, and these men were a little older than me, But, and I was more or less, if I didn't hook up with a girl and I fell ornery and I got approached by a man, why, I was more or less straight,
And you said that the village was like a nightclub on the first level. And
Yeah,
then
that was it. Yeah, it was a nightclub on the first level.
And then the gay
and
people
the gay people were downstairs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was like a separate bar area and stuff
Yes.
for them.
And during intermission, when the crowd would stop upstairs with the entertainment, the people from upstairs would come down and mingle with the gays.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it was known more or less as Lancaster's gay facility for gay men, the downstairs of the village nightclub. Yeah.
Okay. So, at what point did you said that you purchased the bar?
Well, I always went, I run around, then I had a gang of men my age, and we used to go downtown. Lancaster had a lot of nightclubs then, and we'd pop from nightclub to nightclub. And at that time, it was this little bar on Orange Street and Water Street. It was called E.B.'s Pips Place. And we would go there, because it was a cheap bar to go and drink, with the draft beer. And like they had pick-out food out on the bar and stuff at nighttime. And we would meet there all the time. And there we were drinking there. And we got real close with the people that owned it. And Mr. Eby needed a bartender. And he knew that I was born and raised in the hotel business, the bar business. And he approached me, and at that time I took a job for him working as his daytime bartender at that time. And so I was in my mid-20s then. And I worked there for them for quite a few years. And then when he passed away, that's when his wife wanted to sell the place, and she had them for sale for 5-6 years. They owned 2 bars at that time, and I more or less managed the 2 for her. And so she approached me, and she set up a deal that I could buy the bar off of her. So at that time, they didn't own the property, they just owned the liquor license and the equipment. I bought that at that time, and then on down the road then I was able to purchase the property. And I was the one that named it the Tally Ho. Yeah. And it was always, after I bought it, it was more or less just run like a neighborhood bar, but I was more or less adventurous. At that time there was different eras I went through. I tried everything. They had go-go girls, I had go-go girls. They had Mickey Finns, I had Mickey Finns. I did a little bit of everything. Anything to get people in there, like on weekends, I'd hire a little combo, or I'd hire a go-go girl. We had a girl at that time in town, Rosie. She weighed, close to 300 pounds. So I bought her first go-go outfit and made her first, be the first go-go Big Rosie from Lancaster County. She ended up dancing at the village nightclub several times too.
Wow.
She's still alive, I see her all the time.
Oh, wow.
So the Tally Ho went through a lot of stages. Then when the village nightclub went out of business, I thought, well, the village went out of business, I'm going to capitalize on the gay bar. So what I did then, I remodeled the place. So the first thing I did, I put a dress code on to try to keep the rough guys out, you know. And did away with the draft beer and just had mixed drinks and bottled beer, went up the prices, because I spent some money on the room. And to keep the rough stuff out. So at that time we had an organ music. Dick DeRemus, an old-time organ player. So then after that, on down the line, like I say, eventually we get into then, when I met Gary started coming into the Tally Ho. And I was on the door and got to know him, and we got to know each other. And I had a previous lover that I had lived with for 10 years that our relationship was really on the rocks. And that's when I broke away from him, and that's when Gary and I hooked up. And with Gary being in the restaurant business, with the experience he had, he said, well, let's open a restaurant upstairs. So it was just a rooming house. So I made everybody move, and Gary and I worked with a gay boy that came into the Tally Ho. He was a good carpenter. We worked for over a year building the Loft restaurant. So then we ended up, we hired a chef from down in Chester County that Gary worked with in one of the fine dining restaurants, Chef Henry Hodges, and he came to Lancaster and opened the Loft for us. And at that time, that's when we had a lot of fine dining restaurants in Lancaster. And the one well-known fine dining restaurant, which is called the
Tom Payne's.
Tom Payne's, his wife said, that place will never go. It's owned by a bunch of gay guys. It'll never go. Well, within 2 months, we had them all in town eating at the loft because we had good food and good service. And so that's how the loft got started then. And then we were still had the gay bar downstairs. So at that time, we had a great class of gay kids. That's when gay kids could go out into gay bars and they were having fun. We always had a good DJ. Left him by always on music. We spent money on music. We tried to do things downstairs that the kids would enjoy. And so we started running bus trips then at that time to Atlantic City. And we gets down to Atlantic City and the kids would grab their $10 worth of quarters, go into the casinos, spend them, head for the gay bars. Some of our drag girls, they'd stay dressed in drag and go to Atlantic City and get into shows down there. So we always it was always a good time. So I said, God damn it, they're dancing in Atlantic City. We're going to dance two boys in Lancaster. And all kids, how are we going to get away with this? So I thought, well, at that time, the only way I could get away with it was put a minimum on the door on Fridays and Saturday nights to keep the rough stuff out. And actually, the $2 kept a lot of the bully kind of guys out. You know, they didn't want to pay they're not going to pay $2 to come in and play, especially not a gay bar. So what we would do then at that time, we would give them a ticket that was good for the first drink. And then that's when we still had the good DJ music and stuff, and then we had the mix then between the gay girls and the gay guys. But then that not too long after that, like I say, that's when the Sundown Lounge was purchased by a man and wife that had a gay daughter. And that's when they more or less opened then the girls' gay bar in Lancaster. And that still runs as a girls' gay bar, the Sundown. And they run a tough ship up there too. They really do. So
But a lot of people for years thought that the Tally Ho and the Loft were two separate places. But it was the same liquor license, ran the same way. But
all from the time we opened the Loft, we did get a certain amount of straight people that ate at the Loft. A lot of times would go downstairs after dinner.
because we had good music.
Because we had great music. And there was never no
They
trouble
get down,
down
we had a
there.
back stairs, they
You
get
know,
down
with
back
gay,
stairs.
it was never no trouble, you know. So we had a pretty good mix then of people. We still got some of the gay girls that would drift back and forth, and the gay guys would drift up to the girls' bar, you know, and they'd drift back and forth in town. But we always tried to give the kids at the Tally-O what they wanted and what they needed. We would go out occasionally. We'd go down to Philly, and we'd come up to Harrisburg. We'd see what's going on around different places, and we tried to compete and stay up to what we needed to do to give our kids in Lancaster what they wanted in a gay bar. And that was hard at that time, really hard.
Yes, you know how needy we are.
Go back a little bit and talk about, you said you had a lover before you met Gary. Can you talk about how you met that man and what the circumstances were of that relationship?
Well, like I say, I was more or less trade, and I met him as more or less trade. He approached me, and we started going out, and then we got attached, and I more or less came out a little more into gay life then.
About what year do you remember that being?
Well, that had to be in the early 60s.
Yeah, that was in the early 60s. And then he worked, I took him on as a partner into the business, but I was the money behind the business. And then when we broke up, I ended up having to buy him out anyhow, through a lawyer. And that on down the line, that's when I met Gary, and we decided to put the Loft in, and then we run the Loft Restaurant and Tally-O together. And so.
And I'm trying to get some of the timeline too, like when the Tally-Ho first opened, when you first bought the Tally-Ho, Do you remember about what year that was? I think when I looked on the corporation website for the state, it said 1966 was when
Yeah,
it was
around
incorporated.
68, I think.
Okay, 68.
Yeah, mhm.
Okay. And then about when the loft was open, when
The loft opened in 72,
72.
72. Okay.
and then George sold in 85.
Okay. Great.
And like I said, I felt always, my feelings is that the gay bar owned by gay people try to offer more to the gay clientele than a bar that's not gay owned, you know.
And you were real generous with the clientele.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there would always be a great Halloween party. There was a Christmas party, a New Year's party, anything for a party it would do there. And he'd always put out a big spread of food and for free. And you know, he was very given to the kids. And then after he sold, it just was total different. You know.
Tell me when you guys first met, how that relationship developed then.
Well, I was from Chester County, which I said, and I was a dog groomer also. I had a lot of trades I did, and I had my own shop, and then I worked for a kennels also. And I had a lot of gay clientele that came to my shop, but I made myself a rule that I just never fooled around in my own neighborhood or my own area. You know, people were pretty closet still in those days, you know. And this one customer of mine told me about the bar up in Lancaster. And so I went up there one night to try to see what it was about. And you know, I started going in as a customer, and then I met other people there, and I liked it. It was an hour from home, so I felt comfortable. I didn't know anybody, or no one knew me up there, and so I started going up there. And then him and his friend were on their way out then, and so we just got to know each other, and you know, for long we got together, and you know, yeah, it's history.
We've been together then since 43 years.
Yeah. That's incredible. So what year was that when you?
It was 71, beginning of 72,
Okay. Yeah.
and yeah.
And so that's when you decided to go with the restaurant then?
Yeah, it was late 71, maybe early 72, we started to do that. And then we worked almost a year doing that with a carpenter.
Right.
Yeah.
Then after we sold that, every time we sold any one of our businesses, we had to sign a 5-year non-compete. 10-mile radius, we couldn't even work for anybody. Other than, we could work for a caterer, but not another.
Or 10 miles out of the city.
Yeah. So after we sold the loft, we bought a farm in southern Lancaster County.
20 miles south of the city.
And we opened a bed and breakfast there, and at that time I was racing racehorses. I owned horses. I built a barn on the farm. And we were there for about 10 years?
No, not quite that long.
A little over 8 years. And we only had 4 rooms, so we weren't making a living. So it was that time to sell the farm and come back to town. So then...
That's when we bought.
That's when we bought...
It was called Peg's Place.
Peg's Place.
On Shippen Street.
That was more or less, that was owned by 2 gay girls. That was more or less a girls' gay bar too, Peg's Place. I forgot that one.
Well, it was a neighborhood
Yeah,
kind
neighborhood
of bar.
type,
And she had a
but-
boarding house. She had rooms upstairs. She rented to a bunch of guys and
But we bought that then and opened
gutted that
bars.
and did it
And then we were there how long?
6 years.
6 years.
7 years.
And then we sold that, and then we had a break, and then we went into characters. That was our last venture behind the courthouse in Lancaster. And we've been retired now for what?
5 years.
5 years.
And Characters was basically a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
But the
Well,
space
back-
itself
well-
was empty for 50 years, the downtown, if you can
Okay.
believe that. It was on the second floor.
Yeah.
And so we had that, it was a pub, bar, restaurant, yeah.
Right.
I think as far as the 3 restaurants, I think our favorite was probably Molly's. We just liked the feel of that. Characters was the easiest to work because it was all one floor. But I think Molly's had our heart. That was just a really great time. We had a great staff, and we had our dog was named. The restaurant was named after her. She was a black lab, so we had a lot of people that loved animals, and we let people bring their dogs in, and it was near the park, and the setting there is just great. And yeah, it was a fun time.
there's a couple that just moved in beside Molly's, and it's kind of funny. They just got a puppy. It's a yellow lab, and they named it Molly, and they got it before they moved here, so it's kind of like full circle. Like,
Cool.
maybe it'll be good again.
Yeah.
It's a sign.
Neither one of you served.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Oh, did you?
I was in reserves for,
Oh, were you? Really?
Army Reserves for 6 years,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. And what time frame was that? Do you remember?
Well, I was in the engineers.
Okay, and about what year was that you served?
Well, let's see. That would have been in, I guess, that was before that I opened Tally Ho, so that would have been in the 50s.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this was after you got out of school and
Yeah,
you
well,
were helping
that was
your mom?
before I met Gary,
Right, you're helping
that I
your-
was in the Army Reserve
Well,
for
just
6
before you
years.
met Larry.
Yeah, yeah,
That matter.
Yeah, so you're
Probably late 50s or
you were
Late
helping
50s.
helping your mom for a few
Yeah,
years, and then you decided to go into the Army Reserve.
No, the Army Reserve.
Yeah, yeah. Great, that's great. As far as the community, the LGBT community in general, have you, did you get involved in any kind of sort of organizational activities in the city, in in Lancaster, I mean?
No.
I don't think, there was nothing really going on
No.
here in those days.
Okay.
I mean, I think in the last few years, there's been things, but I don't, when we had the tally ho and all that, there was really nothing going on. There was no help for anybody. I mean, it was, you just kind of were on your own kind of thing. You know, you sucked it up and dealt with it, you know.
Right.
But I don't remember any kind of agency or anything even, you know, that I know of.
And you had mentioned off camera before about a bar called the Fez or
Red Fez.
Red Fez.
Yeah.
So that's where the girls' bar is now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where the Sundown Lounge is now.
Okay, I see.
That was more.
Duke Turner owned that.
Duke Turner owned that. He was well known in the city, and that
He was
was
a slime
he
ball.
had the Go-Go Girls
Yep.
and the dancers. Yeah.
He was awful. You gotta admit he was a pain in the ass. Well, he'd bring those girls, his girls in for dinner, and he would just treat them terrible. And he'd treat the servers the same way. You know, he was just awful.
Very, very
He
demanding.
was rude. He was rude.
He drank nothing but. He was a gin drinker. Seagram's cheap gin. So I had to keep Seagram's gin on the shelf.
Or
for
he'd
him.
drink red wine. He'd call ahead of time, want it refrigerated. You want it cold, ice cold. Yeah, he was a creep.
So he was a character.
He died a horrible death. He ran into a wall.
Let's see, I'm trying to think of, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the Tally Ho and kind of what it was like. You mentioned to me off camera about the neon and so forth. Maybe talk a little bit about the decor and how you developed it over the
Well,
years. and so forth.
every couple of years we more or less would change the decor.
It
We-
used to be
we-
done,
we-
first it was done that knotty pine, remember?
Yeah,
Remember the old knotty
knotty
pine?
pine.
The real wood, it wasn't like paneling.
Right.
Then we did the walls were done like a
Cedar shake shingles,
cedar shake
remember?
shingle.
And wagon wheels,
Yeah.
it was like a custard
Now, we had a-
western theme.
We had a 40-seat bar. It was the biggest bar in the city.
It was a big rectangular bar, it was a great bar.
It seated 40 people at the time. And so then we used to go, we'd close every year for a year.
A week.
And for a week, and being gay, we always went to Key West. Because we were going to Key West for the gay life.
It'd be a whole entourage, we'd
and
go
we
every
would-
year.
We would see what was going on in Key West. For the first year we were in Key West, the trend was they came out with peach schnapps.
We never heard
So
of
we
it,
were drinking peach schnapps in Key West. So we brought a couple bottles
We brought a
back.
suitcase back full of
A
it.
suitcase back.
But they were doing all these crazy, you know, those tricks
Crazy.
they were doing with Pete Snops in the gray bars at one
You know.
time.
And then finally, Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board finally came out with it on that you could buy it. So, but we brought that back from Key West, the peach schnapps. And then the one year we went down there,
We met an artist.
one little gay bar that we went to, they had they were doing beer tabs. It was a gold beer tab made up like a snap tab on a beer can that all the kids were wearing, and we bought them down there. Then I
There
had
was a jeweler that made them down there. We bought them down there.
so then I had a friend of mine who was in the jewelry business here in Lancaster, and when he came back here, he saw them, and if any of the gay kids would want them, then he would make them up for the gay kids. I have one upstairs somewhere.
Yeah, they
Still
were,
have
they
it.
were really cool.
Yeah. They just looked like a beer tab.
And then one year we went down, we met
We
this,
bought-
we met this little old guy that was an local artist, and he only did portraits of all different types of men. And we bought, how many did we buy?
we
They were like this.
Nice
size.
beautiful paintings.
And he came to our hotel and laid them out in the lobby, and we picked the ones we wanted. It was one was
I
like a
think we did-
construction worker.
we bought a
and
dozen.
one was blonde. It was all these different poses.
Good-looking men.
Yeah.
Body.
And
you know.
we bought
We
all
brought 'em
these,
back here and got 'em
had them
framed.
reframed, and we did the
And-
whole
and-
perimeter of the bar in those.
And so naturally then, when Gunther came into town, and he bought the gay bar, it wasn't long before he bought it, that after that, he took them all down and sold them to the gay kids.
Yeah, he didn't want them. In fact, he gave them away.
And they were gorgeous. These were really professionally done, gorgeous gay men, you know, showing their,
Well, I don't think a lot of them were even gay. I think they were just
Yeah.
this guy. You know, he was a gay artist, but I think he just paid them, and they were like, you know, they do it for the money. You know, they weren't really nudes even. They were just most of them were like from here up. I think there was the one with the
Yeah.
guy with like a back shot or
Yeah.
something, but most of them were just very
and
well done.
good looking men, all very attractive. So he had no problem selling them to the kids.
Yeah. And tell me about the story of the neon on the ceiling.
Oh yeah, we had there was the old Comet Drive-In that was closed for quite a few years, and an electrician friend of ours ended up buying the sign for a good price, and he did work for us, Kevin. Was it Kevin?
Kevin Landis.
Kevin Landis, and he
He-
said about
He come in and installed it on the ceiling.
He said, "Hey, you know,"
and he put it on all these pulsators that would
Yeah,
flash
it was-
on and off.
he was into all
Well,
that
That's
kind of
when
stuff.
neon was, and the mirror balls was in, you know.
and he made a sign that said the Tally Ho in neon. I think that's all still
Yeah,
there. I think.
I don't. I think that's down. I don't know. The neon may still be on the ceiling, you know.
The last that was
and-
there, we were there, it was
Yeah.
still there.
And I think the DJ area is still in the same
Yeah,
area where
yeah.
we had the DJ booths in the same area where we had it. But since then, Gunther's put new bar in, high top tables, you know, and all. He really made a nice. It's a nice lounge. It really is.
But when
Yeah.
that bar was the original rectangular, that was a fun bar because the gay kids loved to camp and carry on, and they'd go back and forth. You know, you'd say something smart, and someone else would. You know how they are.
We could seat 40 people at that bar, and like Gary told you, on Fridays and Saturday nights there was always over 200 people in there.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
fun. It was a fun place.
And every time, it never would fail. Anytime you would have any trouble, it was always the goddamn lesbians that started.
Oh yeah, we could have 200 men, never had a problem.
It was always
You'd
a
have two
lesbian.
girls, and there'd be a fight.
Yeah.
Always, it was always the girls fighting.
But I credit it to that. I credited a lot of that $2 minimum, helping to keep us away from a lot of trouble. It would turn a lot. It would turn a lot of people away. Just didn't want to pay that $2 to come in. You know.
So did you have any incidents of trouble
Oh,
during
sure.
the time?
And this one, he could put his hand on the bar and jump over the bar, and he had a nightstick full of lead, and he'd run him down the street and he'd knock him out. I mean, he wouldn't take those shit. He was tough. I mean, they'd come in, throw a beer bottle or something, or say some smart words, and then run out the door. Well, he'd be right out the door after him. He'd run them down. It was funny. But we had
in all the years we were ever in all the years that we owned liquor licenses, we never had a drop of trouble with Liquor Control Board as far as violations or citations. And the same way with the Board of Health, never no violations in 40-some years in the restaurant and bar business from either one. We tried to run a pretty straight place.
And you didn't have any trouble with the local police or anything
No,
like
no,
that?
no, we never.
Matter of fact,
no.
we had quite a few of
We-
the police that had upstairs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the mayor, I mean, that we never had any problem
No.
with that. And I'll tell you, there was two young doctors that really got us started. The one had been a MASH doctor, and then it was one that was a ear, nose, and throat specialist. And they were two of our first customers, and they became lifelong friends. And the one has passed on, but the one's still alive. And to this day, they're still friends of
And
ours.
when we first opened the loft, we didn't even take credit cards.
Yeah.
We had Elaine Tate come here from Philadelphia to one of them restaurant
Critics.
critics, and she wrote in her article, when you go there, you have to have a cold cash, because they take no credit cards. We had our own billing system, where my stepfather at the time, he helped us get started in the restaurant. He bought us our first kitchen. After my mother got remarried, my stepfather bought us our first kitchen. And he was the one that pushed us into doing the loft, really, because they used to go down to the restaurant where Gary worked as a waiter, my mother and him and my aunt and uncle, and eat. They loved the food there. And when we came and we worked on that, he put money into the restaurant for us, and he insisted that we hire the chef from that restaurant to come and open the loft. And that's when we hired Chef Henry to come from down there in Chester County to open the loft for us.
And how, speaking of your families, how accepting have they
Oh.
been?
As far as my mother, he was like a son, and I was like a son. Yeah, very well
My
accepted.
parents
Yeah.
never, they were
No,
always very
my mother-
supportive. And my mom worked for both, well, she didn't work at our last restaurant, she had passed on, but she worked at the other two restaurants. She would drive up here on Friday night and Saturday night, never stay over, no matter how bad the weather was. She had to go home for my father, she said. But she would, she'd come up and work.
She'd
Hosting
be
or whatever.
hosting or
Yeah.
doing whatever.
Wow.
And but no, there was never no problem. And he does have a brother.
And it's never been a problem with any of our family. And my aunt, who's 92, I'm definitely one of her favorites. And her uncle, my uncle and her worked for us. We had the loft at the holidays. They would work our catering crew because we didn't have enough staff to do catering. We did quite a bit of catering, and they would work every holiday season on weekends for us.
So, but
And
both sides of the families accepted.
we never had any issues.
I was like a third son to his mother and dad, and he was like a brother to me. Yeah, my mother,
I know I hear a lot of stories about families with their kids or parents disown them or this or that. Or
No,
we never had any.
We
of that,
never had
none of that problem. I mean, we really.
But
were lucky.
then, with his brother, and with the grandchildren and stuff, we never. Gary and I never really flaunted our gayness. And even over all the years that I've been gay, I never can say that. When I owned the bar, I never tried to let myself get involved amongst too many relationships with any of the customers. I come out into gay life, but I really only had two gay men that I was really ever involved real much, and that was my first lover, and then when I met Gary, and that was more or less it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Plus, I don't think our staff ever saw us like hugging and kissing or anything like that. I mean, we just
And
have
we
a
never
lot of
done
respect
it.
for them as well as ourselves.
Around his brother's two sons, they call me Uncle George, and we never left. And his brother always respected us for that. And his brother always was just treated me like like he does Gary,
One thing I'm curious about, being that Lancaster is kind of the center of Amish country, did you ever get any Amish young guys coming?
We would have a couple. Remember, there's a couple of those Amish guys who come in the bar, but you had a couple.
Older men.
But you had a couple girls that used to come in there that were like trade that would take them out.
Yeah.
But they never really went with the gay guys.
We would see when I first bought the place, we were open in the daytime like a neighborhood bar, And then, like I say, with that strip down on West King Street, where there was bars and where a lot of the lesbians hung and stuff, and they'd only have a block to walk up to the Tally-Ho, and there was like hookers and stuff. They'd walk back and forth. we did have some Amish men that would go drift in now and then and come in and buy a beer and try to hook up with a woman, you know.
Well, that one girl,
Yeah.
Sheila. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, no
But now
evidence.
we know a couple people now that are in Lancaster that were Amish and have dropped out, and
And I can prove, this was before drugs was really bad. I can truthfully say, I don't feel that in our era at the Tally Ho, where drugs was a really a big issue. At that time, maybe pills, like diet pills, uppers and downers, but it wasn't cocaine and shooting up and stuff like that, none of that. Yeah, and even, wasn't even much marijuana then, no. How gay kids would do those. God.
especially bartenders.
No, we never had much trouble other than now and then.
And we never really had any fights.
A little scurvy breakout like on a Saturday night or something, and it was always late, just about the time the bar was getting ready to close, and we'd try to get it broke up. You know, we didn't have to have
We
the
never
cops.
had to have the cops.
No, we didn't have to have the cops there. And it was always mostly then, like we said, lesbians. But that when that was early time when those lesbians then, like I say, they'd roll their cigarettes up in the white T-shirt and they were wearing black leather jackets. And I used to tell them, hey, you come in here, you're going to behave. If you want to be treated like a goddamn man, I'll treat you like a man. You know what I mean? If you don't behave. I didn't take no shit off none of them. I had that nightstick because that came through my grandpa running his place. He always had a nightstick behind his bar, and he was a tough old dago. He didn't take no shit. And I learned that I run a good place.
And our staff was mostly mixed. It wasn't all gay people. We had straight in. Most of our staff was straight. To tell you the truth, they weren't gay. But you know, they all mixed good together. And once in a while, you'd have a customer that would, you know, be a little smart, you know, about stuff. But we never had too much trouble.
But at that time, Harrisburg was the area for gay bars. I mean, Harrisburg had 3, 4. They had the Clock. You remember the Clocks?
Clock bar.
That was some gay bar. That would get so crowded, you'd go in the front door, and if you went out, you had to go outside to pee. You had to go out the front door and to get to the bathroom or something, and then you come in the back door. And that bar, as long as I can remember, they more or less didn't have gay bartenders. They had 2 guys that run that for them, whoever owned it, and they were handsome men, but they knew how to play the game, and they were loved by the gay kids. And they made money hand over fist, you know. So a good gay bar, you don't need to actually have gay help, but you have to have to run a good man's gay bar. You gotta have attractive looking bartenders, and they gotta be, if they're straight, they gotta be able to make up and have fun with them while they're there, and when they leave, you know what I mean? And that's how those bartenders were, as far as I know, in Harrisburg at that time. But then there was the other bar in Harrisburg, that was the big hotel there, in the basement there. They had a bar down there, I can't think what that one was called. That and the Clock did the most business. Then some of the newer ones came later. You know.
What do you remember about the Clock bar? Going in there, how often did you go in there?
Every now and then I could break away from Tally Ho and we'd go up. You know what I mean? It was like Tally Ho, wall to wall, and they had the good bar downtown, and the Clock. They were both good bars. They were close enough that they were in that one big hotel downtown, I think it was called the Warner.
Warner Hotel, yes.
I believe it was called the Warner.
Yeah.
And they would walk from the Warner up to the Clock and back and forth, you know. And both of them bars done real well in Harrisburg at that time. Yeah.
And the reason why it was called the Clock bar is because it had
All in clocks,
clocks.
yeah. And different times for all around the world.
different
yeah.
time zones, yeah.
But now they never danced in there. That was just a drinking bar because it wasn't that big, and it would get that crowded that they couldn't dance. You know, there was no place for them to dance.
Well, you used to always say the dancers don't make you any money. Remember that?
Huh?
You used to always say the dancers don't make you any money.
No, no.
When did the tally ho start dancing? Was that right from the beginning, or did you?
No, that wasn't
That's
at the
before I
beginning.
came. That's before I came
Yeah,
there.
yeah, when-
Had to be probably 68, 69.
Yeah, around 68, I guess.
Was it, and it would be packed. And that guy, you know how the gay kids are about show tunes and all that. That guy never hardly ever had to look up any music. He had all this stuff in his head. And we often said, it'd be neat just to have like a little piano bar that you could sit around and maybe like pick at stuff and just have drinks. We loved that bar, and we always went there, the gang of us.
And another thing, all the years that we've been in the business, and the way the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board is about wanting to make money, why they never came out with, now, especially now, why they don't come out with just a beer and
Wine
wine
license.
license that allows you just to sell beer and wine. In Florida, they have a lot of them. Can you imagine how many beer and wine license the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board would sell? Just in Philadelphia alone, how many little great restaurants do they have that are all BYOB because they cannot afford the license? And now with this new law the liquor board came out with, liquor license we're selling for 100, 125, 150,000. Now they're getting up to $300,000
Oh,
for a liquor
they're
license.
400,000 here now.
And you have to buy it from somebody else. So why, if they want to make some fast money, if they would come out with just an issue of beer and wine license for these small restaurateurs that want to open, that have restaurants, that would buy them if they could afford them, and if they come out with a license just for them and would only allow them to sell beer and wine, they'd sell a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
You're good then, Barry, with your next question.
Okay. In terms of your relationship, you said off camera about getting married. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, we kind of really held off for a long time. We're still kind of maybe old-fashioned. I don't know. We figure we're going to go to hell for being gay anyway, maybe. So we kind of held off not getting married for a long time. And we have a really good accountant who is not, he is straight, he's not gay. And he was in the military, and he was an attorney, and he was our attorney for years. He did our wills and all that, and he does our taxes. And he kept saying, I'm telling you, you got to do this or you're going to be sorry. And he said, I keep up with all the gay stuff that's going on, which really cracked us up. We figured, here's a straight guy that, and he kept on us, and he said, I think you should do it. And then when they finally passed it in Pennsylvania, we
Well,
thought,
and
okay.
really there wasn't many in Lancaster area that was. When they first came out with it, I think more or less, I think Dean, that has the Belvedere, was one of the first one we known to get married. And then it was the one that has Isaacs,
Oh yeah, Phil Weiner. Yeah.
Phil Weiner, and his friend got married. And they've been married quite a few years. And like I say, then we did it after, we just didn't think it was necessary. And
he just kept on us, and he said
the
about
accountant said
the tax
he
reasons.
more or less pushed it, and then we did it,
So we finally,
And we don't wear no rings or nothing,
we're weird gay people. We're still in the closet, but we talked about it, but we just never. It was never a big issue for
And
us.
then it's a shame to say, but over the years, from the time we owned and run the Tally Ho together, so many gay friends that we had are gone. A lot of them through drugs,
Well,
AIDS,
yeah.
but those kids we can remember. They were all good-looking kids, but they were living in that fast lane. Really in that.
We look back at how many we knew, and to think they were all gone. I mean, they were all a lot younger than we were. It's just unbelievable.
And most of them that we know that are gone, they're younger than we are. Yeah. But they were living in that fast lane, just tricking. And then,
So the moral of the story
and
is,
then it
get
got,
somebody and settle down.
then it got the
that,
drugs.
Johnny?
It got the drug with needles, and you know.
Don't be shopping around too much.
Well, in terms of the AIDS epidemic, do you recall during that time period, did you get involved at all in the community about that whole issue, or was there any?
There was never a big thing in the area. I don't think.
I think
about it.
Lancaster was,
Yeah, there was.
Lancaster's
never-
always been kind of like in a weird bubble with stuff, and it just,
not like Philadelphia and the bigger
we
cities.
knew, but you know, it was still like, when it first came out, it was still pretty, people didn't talk about it. Matter of fact, when we had our second restaurant, one of our kids that worked for us at the loft, we knew that he was full-blown AIDS, and his friend had died, and he came to me about a job, and we hired him, and he worked in the kitchen with me, but we were really careful about everything. It freaked me out all the time. And one morning he cut himself in a slicer, blood everywhere. Well, of course, we couldn't let this get out, so he was all upset. I said, look, you sit down here, take care of this. And I had bleach. I bleached that place from top to bottom and whatever. And then soon after that, he knew he was getting worse, and he said, I think I should leave because it's not good
He didn't
for
want
you.
it. He didn't want it to get it to the point where people would find
Where
out
it got out, it would
that
ruin
he
our
was-
business.
That he was working for us, and that would hurt us. That people say, "Well, I'm not going there to eat anymore. That guy in the kitchen has AIDS."
So he left.
He more or less.
But I'll tell you, it
And it was a
worried
ble-
us because I mean
it was a blessing, really, because it was worrying us at that time too, you know. But at that time, worrying us, we didn't want to say, "Well, we can't have you here." We weren't that rude or
Right.
that nasty people to work for at that time. But when he finally said that he was quitting, we were happy. Yeah.
But then it really never really seemed like it got as bad here as like in the bigger cities. But
No.
I'm sure I know it was here because we know we lost a lot of kids to it. But it didn't seem like much ever happened here. It seemed like
And when it did, it wasn't. If it did happen, it wasn't really broadcasted that it happened. You know.
I'm sure a lot of people that's what they died
But
from. But it
we
was
have so
never-
many, still have so many nice gay friends, like Charlie and
John.
John, and the older old boys that go back, way back to the Tally Hill, that really enjoyed. We seen them growing up and meeting each other and getting involved, and they're still good, great guys. But they got involved and they stayed involved with each other, and they live a nice gay lifestyle, you know.
And in terms of the community in general, in Lancaster and the whole atmosphere for LGBT people, have you seen changes over time in terms of what the community is like?
We never, like you say, we were never hassled much, like by the mayor or.
Well, I think this town is very open about stuff
or
like that,
police
and our mayor
department,
definitely
yeah.
is very
Yeah.
good.
He ate at our restaurant.
He's not judgmental
Him and
about
him and his wife. Well, they're personal friends of ours. Mayor Gray and his wife, and we're great friends, you know.
But I mean, I think the community in general here, it doesn't seem. Of course, we're out of the loop. We're not involved in anything anymore, so it doesn't seem like we probably are not up in what's going on. But it doesn't seem like they're having a lot of problems here. I'm sure there are issues.
This is the first time we've ever been approached to do something like this. That's why I sort of thought it might be nice to do it. You know.
Yeah, it's really important to get the perspective of people who've been involved in the community for so long, you know, because it's for young people, they really don't understand the history.
I mean, like in all the years that we've been involved in the restaurant business, all our customers that ever come to the restaurant know that we're gay.
Yeah.
And I mean, we always cater to our customers, and we have such a rapport with all our restaurant people, straight and gay people, that it's just
I
unbelievable.
mean, we go out, we always see people we know. I mean, old customers or people in the business. I mean, we still.
First thing we hear from them, "Oh, when are you going to open another place?"
It's like get a life.
That's over.
I'm trying to think back to some of the things that you said before off camera. One of the things you mentioned was the whorehouse. was a
Oh,
place
it was the Stevens House. It was called the Stevens House. It's,
And
it's still there, that building.
Okay.
It's on the corner of
That's
King
on
and
West,
Prince.
West King and Prince.
Prince.
The Stevens House. There was a restaurant in there called the Whorehouse, and that was run by two young gay boys at that
Yeah,
time.
they had
That
like a
was
fine dining
very,
restaurant.
very high tech.
And then they had like a lounge
It
with
was,
a,
it was on the same caliber as a loft.
yeah, it was nice.
Very high tech. And then they did have a room in the back, and they,
It was a pretty good size.
and they sort of
bar.
it was after the Tally Ho was gone. They sort of opened that back room for gays, and they had dancing back there and stuff.
Well, they got more of a
because we
mixed
had
crowd,
already
too.
had it. They had it too, and then the kids would walk. It was only a block. They just walked between the two back and forth,
Yeah.
and then they ended up closing, and that was the end of that.
I think they-
what time frame was that?
I think they probably closed after we sold the loft, or about the time we closed it. Yeah,
About the same
yeah.
time.
So early 80s,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 80s, yeah.
And John and Charlie mentioned a bar called the Fiddler. Do you remember anything about that?
The Fiddler, that was also down there.
The Stevens House. Yeah.
Stevens House.
Oh, it was part of the
Yeah,
Stevens
yeah.
House. Okay.
And that was more or less a restaurant type bar too, but being.
Was that before the whorehouse? Or was that after?
I think that was after the Whorehouse. Yeah.
That place has gone through so many different
Yeah,
changes.
so many
and
different names.
and all that.
But the Fiddler they got some gay people too, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think there was a gay man at that time involved in the Fiddler. There was a gay man involved in some of the management at the Fiddler. That's when they start getting involved with having some gay clientele there also. Yeah.
Okay. Anything that you can think of that I've missed in terms
No,
of your?
I think we covered most of it.
Okay. Okay.
Well, they used to call George the godfather of the gays. That's what they used to call him. The Padrona.
Seems like an appropriate name.
George is he'll be 80 in March.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So he's seen a lot happen in the gay life in
Yeah.
this little town.
Definitely.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Good. Well, thank you so much.
That was
both of you,
fun, yeah.
For the interview. I think that's been a great interview.
Memory lane here.
Yeah. Great.